There's a lot of things going on. As you mentioned before the show, Joey, there's already silly season articles coming out. Before we get into the NASCAR chatter, there's some silly season activities. A lot of people talking about Alex Palou. Where is he going to go? Marcus Ericsson, where is he going to go? How do we, what happens in general? What new faces might we see? It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. I think right now, if Alex Palou continues his dominance, there's no reason why he shouldn't be in Formula One. I will completely, stand by that. But you never know. I mean, it could be all of a sudden he was dominant, and then as IndyCar racing could be, he might struggle the next few races. I doubt it. That Ganassi team is outstanding. But we'll just have to kind of see how things progress. Is Ganassi going to pay Marcus Ericsson? I don't know. Is Marcus Ericsson going to go to Andretti? Is Marcus Ericsson going to go elsewhere? It's very, 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 very curious to see what happens.
Well, that's so Nathan Brown from the Indy Star, who covers IndyCar. He had a big old long report article that came out on Monday kind of covering all this. I know Marshall Pruitt has reported on all this as well, but the latest that I read from Nathan Brown, it kind of comes as no surprise, I guess, when you just take a more wide-scaping look at it. But really, it's just all coming down to the big domino of Alex Palou, and both of them have reported that Alex Palou's company, that management team that we said he should send away in a boat and have him never come back, has been apparently working the F1 paddock like crazy. So they're out there just like handlers on the Vegas Strip or something, just trying to see what's going on and if they can get their guy into a Formula One ride, which I think is really interesting because it again is this battle that we've talked about, Connor, of you have a driver that's the caliber of Alex Palou doing what he's doing in IndyCar, that really from what the reports are seeming to make it out to be, that he would take the lowest of the low in Formula One, just to make that leap and say, okay, I'm 26 years old and now I'm full-time in Formula One. Doesn't matter what team I'm racing for, doesn't matter where I'm at, but I'm here full-time in a ride in Formula One, as opposed to being the most dominant driver on the grid in IndyCar. So we keep getting that, those reports, and I just find it really, really interesting. I really do, the fact that, you have a driver that is as dominant as he has been. And that is kind of how, I don't want to say desperate, but that's how much he's trying and his team is trying to get over there on that grid, is to take some of the teams, some of the cars that haven't even scored anything in Formula One yet.
Yeah. And I would say Alex, I've got to know Alex more, recently over the last couple months. I've actually I've got to call his trainer. I got to get a new trainer. I lost the trainer in the divorce after.
These are things you don't think about.
Weeks. These are things you don't think about.
The TVs, the dog, the trainer.
Yeah, but Alex. I think Alex. And Alex is young enough as well. I think we keep forgetting how young Alex Palou is. If you have a chance at Formula One, you're going to take it. I mean, as a driver, I think you have to. We saw Sebastian Bourdais take that chance. He came back to IndyCar, still found a lot of success. I think as someone from Spain as well, he loves, he loves his life over there, I believe. And probably, enjoys it maybe more than living in Indiana. I don't know. But I love Indiana. But I think, when you have that European background and you've grown up there, sometimes people love, being closer to home. Sure. And racing in Formula One, although it's a world championship, you're traveling everywhere, you can be based in Europe. So, and if not, then, everyone's based in Europe, essentially. So, I could see Alex taking whatever chance he can get in Formula One. I could see him hopefully being well-respected in Formula One. I would love it for us as a IndyCar racing community.
Would be big.
But there, you look at a couple Formula One teams who are about ready to kick their drivers out. But also, let's say Alex stayed here in IndyCar. How do you leave Ganassi? You know what I mean? I mean, that's such a great, we ask this question all the time. but he's obviously got a McLaren connection. McLaren is they could potentially run 4 cars, in IndyCar easily, as long as they get, they have so many people, they have so many resources, so many sponsors. They could run 4 cars easily. They could easily be like, Andretti runs 4 cars with strength. McLaren could do the same thing. So I'm very, very curious to see just what plays out. And let's say Marcus Ericsson leaves as well. Maybe, there's business that can't be done there. Suddenly there's 2 open seats at Ganassi, the best team in IndyCar racing right now. Like, that is, right. If I won the lottery, guess who's there? I'm showing up to Ganassi's front door and saying, name your price. You know what I mean? Like, I would, as a driver, you want to be driving for that team. Yeah. Certainly right now in this era. But yeah, very, very curious. And Mid-Ohio is usually the weekend where people start talking. Mid-Ohio used to be later in the season, I believe in August, or maybe I'm wrong, but for some reason in Mid-Ohio, it seems like everyone starts talking about next year. And so that's kind of what's probably going to happen this year, or this weekend.
It starts off July. We're in the second half of the season officially. And then, doesn't, like, a lot of the contracts are set up to where it's like post-August 1. That's where you could start making moves, right?
Racing season is underway. New customers download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code SPEEDSTREET. Bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly.
That's code SPEEDSTREET. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/auto racing terms.
Yeah, start having conversations of everyone's a little bit different, but for some reason the conversations start right here this weekend. So very curious. I'm sure I will get a lot of questions.
It's like when the combine is in Indy in February. The free agency officially opens in mid-March for the NFL. All that shit's happening at the JW or Prime 47. Like a month before. Now, I did want to ask Conor. So, let's say Alex Palou does get a ride in one of those seats in Formula One to where it's, more so at the back of the grid or has been. Is it the same situation of like, I think about it, when when I was going into college and, I had low level baseball opportunities maybe to play, at a low level college, right? And my parents and people would say to me, I'd be like, why would I want to go do that when I could go to the school I want to and just be like a college student and you whatever. And, my parents would say to me, they'd be like, well, think about like employers are more likely to hire someone who shows that they've been an athlete for 4 years and like balance all the responsibility and have that on their resume, if you will. Is that kind of the same situation in a way for, his move up to one of the higher teams in Formula One, to one of the more competitive teams in Formula One, is so much easier to, if he's coming from even one of the guys at the back of the grid of Formula One as compared to being the top dog in IndyCar. So what I'm saying is it's an easier move up. Once you're in the field there, it's an easier move up to potential more competitive teams as opposed to being the most dominant driver in IndyCar and then trying to make the leap to one of the more competitive teams in Formula One.
Yeah, I would say it's much. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I would say it's much more rare. It'll be much more difficult for Alex to, let's say, go from winning the championship. Let's say he wins the championship in IndyCar this year. He's very, very dominant. And he's not going to get the call from Red Bull or Mercedes. They're not going to be,
yeah,
or Ferrari.
Sure.
But if he happens to go over there, let's say he takes Nick DeVries' seat at AlphaTauri, which is I mean, shoot, anything's possible at this point. That's a Red Bull connection, but you really have to get in there and do well immediately. Let's say he goes to Williams or, I don't even know. Anywhere where there's an open seat. You have to do well there pretty quickly. And if he does, we've seen drivers go up the ladder. We've seen drivers go from smaller teams. Like, obviously you had George Russell, who was at Williams, which was the worst team on the grid.
Yeah.
But he outqualified his teammate every single weekend. If it becomes a one-on-one competition, if you're in that position in Formula One, right? So if Alex is driving for Williams, one of the slower teams on the grid right now, you got to outqualify your teammate every weekend. You got to beat him in all the races. You got to try to if you have one or two races like Alex Albon did at the last race where he finished 7th and he gets a lot of points for Williams, like, people talk about that for forever. Racing is such a momentum game. It's such a both IndyCar and Formula One. I mean, any motorsport, if you've got the juice, if you've got like the people talking the right way and you control the narrative around yourself, that goes a long way. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but he will not go from winning an IndyCar to the best team in Formula One. I would say you have to go to Formula One somewhere first and establish yourself, and then get the opportunity to maybe rise up the ranks there.
Now, the talk about Marcus Ericsson right now is I find it really interesting, and both Kevin Lee and I'm sure Marshall Pruitt and I just read from Nathan Brown, reporting about how he is. Marcus has been very up front, just been, hey, we are far apart for whatever reason. They don't want to pay me. I want to be here, but we are far apart. And then you have the response from Chip. It was just like, hey, I want him here, but then of course we have this massive gap apparently, and the talk of him going to the 29 car for Andretti. I mean, as it stands right now, Connor, going from Ganassi at all to the 29 ride, I mean, isn't that competitively, on the grid, wouldn't that be a downgrade for Marcus?
So what's interesting, and I get like, I can be really real with people about this. Marcus came into IndyCar with a big sponsor, right?
Yep.
And when you have a big sponsor, you want to go to the best team, which is exactly what he did. Husky Chocolate, his group behind him. But you don't want to rely on that as a driver for forever, because sponsors come and go.
Sure.
Partnerships come and go. He wants to be there whether he has a sponsor or not. And Marcus Ericsson has won an Indy 500 for Ganassi.
Yep.
And he's finished in the top 10 for like 800 races in a row or whatever the wild stat is. And so once you come in with a sponsor, though, this is a very difficult part about motorsport. If you enter a series, or if you get into the game with a lot of support behind you, 9 times out of 10, you will not be able to go anywhere else unless you bring that sponsorship with you. My career is exactly in that place right now. I had no sponsors really for my rookie year because I was drafted in on my talent, what I could do, the races that I've won. And it was a low budget. It was a small operation, but I got hired to drive. I was paid $0 to drive, but I got a chance. That rookie year then got me hired by a team that had a sponsor. I was paid to drive a racing car, did not have to bring any sponsors to the AJ Foyt racing team, but I lost the momentum. That was a difficult year for the team. Both cars were slow. Everything was difficult. And then they dropped. They took another driver that had a bunch of funding. So I then went to a position of, if I were to get back in IndyCar, there's no way anyone would hire me unless I had a sponsor. And so was I hired to substitute for people? Yeah, for sure. I was the guy that jumped in when the Harding racing team wanted a different opinion on the car. Like when someone got hurt, like I was the guy to call, because I was good enough to do that. But it's like still all these teams need money to go racing. And if you bring that money, well, you're always going to be that guy. And that's exactly how I am now. I only went racing with the U.S. Air Force partnership. I only went racing because I had bitnow.com as a sponsor. And like, if no one is going to hire me to drive next year, like that's a thing unless I have a sponsor, which I'm totally fine with because I know exactly what I could do in the right team, the right situation. But the problem is I'm going to have to create that opportunity for myself. Now, what I find like kind of not insane, but just wild about the Marcus situation is like, realistically, Marcus has come in with this big sponsor, but he's won the Indy 500. You know, he's done a lot more obviously than I have. And so he does deserve, whether there's a sponsor or not, to be hired to be a racing driver, to be a competitive racing driver. So, you know what? I hope he figures things out with Ganassi because I think that's a great relationship that he's got there. He's drank the milk with them. Ganassi's an incredible organization. They are clearly the top level of the sport right now, but it's still very close with everyone else. So, like, if he gets an opportunity with Andretti or McLaren, I mean, well, basically he would be going back to McLaren if he went there. But I could see him doing it. That's kind of that's realistically how this sport works. Alex Palou's never going to need to find a sponsor, right? Joseph Newgarden's never going to need to find a sponsor. Any of the guys driving for Penske, they're going to never need to find a sponsor to bring. But, you know, there are certain people that have to, you know, put themselves in a position or who have put themselves into a position, you know, to get where they are now. And some do find a place where they establish themselves. I thought I did for a while. But now it's a business. This sport is still a business.
Yeah, clearly. With all the talks and kind of the reports that are going on around Marcus, and then, you know, kind of the third domino that comes from all this is Felix Rosenqvist.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's been in the mix, definitely in the mix, all year long with McLaren, but has kind of always been just hey, McLaren's got Pato and Rossi moving forward. Probably more than likely, you know, especially when Nathan Brown even said this in his report. He's like, more than likely what I see is, you know, you're going to have Palou on the grid with Rossi and Pato as teammates next year, which is pretty scary to think about for the rest of the field. But then what happens with Felix Rosenqvist? You know, I mean, does he find himself back in there with Chip? Is he in play for the 29? I mean, what happens with Fro?
Yeah, that's a great question. Felix has had great races this year. Like, I would say he's had a lot of bad luck, but like the guy put it on pole at Texas yet again.
Front row at Indy.
Front row at Indy. Fast during the 500 until he got crossed up there. Yeah, I mean, and again, Road America, the guy was flying through the field. And so I don't know how he can be ignored. Great talent, great driver. I think he's really in his, you know, hitting his stride right now, or whatever that phrase is. But yeah, there's going to be a lot going on. I think you'll see. I think you'll see several moving pieces. This offseason will be very, very interesting. I will obviously be trying to forcefully put myself somewhere as well. But yeah, it's going to be. I'm very curious to see how it plays out.